Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
After the main character dies inside of his previous life, he gets reborn inside of Mushoku Tensei. He has Dante's template. What is he gonna do inside of Mushoku Tensei?
Chapter 1 1% Devil. I died on a Tuesday with cheap rain in my eyes and a truck horn in my ears. That was the last thing I remembered from Earth. Not family, not some grand speech, not even a heroic last thought. Just wet pavement, headlights, a body that stopped listening, and the stupid realization that I had never finished the pizza sitting on my desk at home. Then I woke up screaming in a baby's throat. The world came back too bright, too loud, and too impossible. A woman's exhausted voice, a man's relieved laugh, warm hands, lamplight, the smell of wood smoke and medicine. I tried to move like an adult and got betrayed by arms that barely knew how to twitch. Someone said a name. Leon. Not mine. Then another baby cried nearby. That one was Rudius Greyrat. That was when panic became something colder. I knew that name. Mushoku Tensei. Paul Greyrat, Zenith, Rudius, Buna Village, magic tutors, displacement, monsters, wars, gods playing games with people who thought they were making choices. And now me. Leon Greyrat, apparently. Rudius's twin brother, or close enough that every maid in the house treated us like a matched set of trouble waiting to happen. For the first year, I could do nothing useful with that information except survive being small. I learned the language faster than I should have. I watched Paul train in the yard and Zenith pray over us both. I watched Rudius stare at things with an old man's shame hiding behind a child's face. He was reincarnated too. I knew it before he said a word. No baby looked at the world like that unless something had gone wrong before birth. The second impossible thing happened when I turned 2. Blue text appeared in front of my eyes. Dante template, 1% synchronization. Current principle, style is not decoration. Style is identity under pressure. Power access, restricted. Rule, demons, monsters, and active killers may be put down. Innocents are not prey. Surrender matters unless it is a trick. I stared at the words from my crib. Then I laughed. It came out as a toddler's giggle, which ruined the effect, but still. Dante. Not just a sword, not just guns, a template, a personality-shaped power system that apparently rewarded me for acting like the most stylish devil hunter to ever turn trauma into one-liners. At 1%. The first time I tried to use it, I nearly broke the floor. I had been reaching for a wooden toy sword. My fingers closed around it, the template hummed, and the entire room bent around my grip. Not visibly, not enough for Zenith to scream, but I felt it, a pressure under my skin, an ocean behind a cracked door, something so absurdly large that even 1% of it made the air afraid. The toy sword snapped. I blinked at the broken wood. Rudius, sitting across from me with a picture book, stared. "Did you do that?" he asked in toddler language too clean for his age. I looked at the pieces, then at him. "Maybe." His eyes narrowed. That was how our first real conversation started. We did not confess everything. Not then. Rudius was cautious in a way I understood. I was cautious because the Dante template kept whispering that caution was fine as long as it did not become cowardice. By 3, Rudius was secretly practicing magic. By 3, I was secretly practicing how not to destroy things by touching them wrong. That was harder than it sounded. The template did not make me graceful automatically. It gave me access, instinct, timing, and a terrible sense of humor that kept surfacing at the worst possible moments. When Paul dropped his training sword, I said, "Rough day at the office," without thinking. Paul stared at me. Zenith stared at me. Rudius choked on his soup. I was 4. The house decided I was strange. Fair. Roxy arrived when we were 5. She came for Rudius officially, but she noticed me on the first day. Hard not to. Rudius shaped water with careful genius. I shaped mana like it owed me money, and then tried to pretend I had meant to make the training cup explode. Roxy's hat tilted as she stared at the wet wall. "Leon," she said slowly, "what spell did you use?" "Bad one. That is not a spell name." "It should be." Rudius laughed. Roxy did not, but her mouth twitched. The Dante template pulsed. Synchronization, 1.01%. So that was how it worked. Not by training alone, not by killing, by becoming more like Dante where it mattered, fearless without being stupid, cocky without being cruel, relaxed in danger, ruthless against monsters, protective when innocent people were in the blast zone. That sounded fun, until I remembered where I was. This world had monsters. Human ones too. I had no interest in becoming a saint. I also had no interest in letting people die because I wanted to keep my hands clean. Dante killed demons because leaving them alive got people eaten. That rule made sense to me. So I trained. Rudius learned magic with hunger and shame. I learned movement, mana reinforcement, sword forms Paul barely understood why I could copy, and the strange internal rhythm of a power that kept asking whether I wanted to be cool or merely strong. The answer was both. Obviously. The first true test came in the forest beyond Buna village. Not a duel, not a lesson, not Paul showing off. A red-eyed boar the size of a wagon crashed through the trees while Zenith, Lilia, Rudius, and I were gathering herbs under escort. One guard went down with his leg torn open. Another dropped his spear. The boar charged toward Rudius. My body moved before fear finished arriving. 1% of Dante answered. The world slowed. I picked up the fallen spear, spun it once because apparently my soul had priorities, and stepped between my brother and the monster. "Bad day to be bacon," I said. Then I threw. The spear crossed the clearing like a red line and punched through the boar's skull. It died instantly. The forest went silent. Rudius stared at me. The guards stared at me. Zenith looked like she could not decide whether to hug me or faint. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.03%. Style rank, D. I almost took offense. Then I looked at the dead monster, the injured guard, and Rudius still breathing behind me. Fine. D rank could live. Chapter 2, Bad Day to be Bacon. Paul Greyrat did not handle the dead boar well. That sounded unfair because he handled the actual body fine. He checked the guard, helped Zenith calm down, dragged the monster away from the road, and told everyone in a very serious voice that the children were safe. Then he looked at the spear buried through the boar's skull. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the spear. "Leon," he said, "how did you do that?" I considered several answers. I am secretly a reincarnated adult with a Dante template that gives me 1% access to power so ridiculous I am scared of sneezing wrong. Too much. I threw it really hard, I said. Rudius made a strangled noise beside me. Paul rubbed his face with both hands. That is not an explanation. It is accurate. The template pulsed like it approved. That worried me more than Paul's expression. The injured guard survived because Zenith was better under pressure than people gave her credit for. Roxy arrived after the fact and asked better questions than Paul did. She examined the boar, the spear, the gouge the spear had left through the tree behind it, and finally my hands. "Your mana flared when you moved," she said. "Did it?" "You know it did." I smiled. Roxy sighed. "You and your brother are going to make me old." "You're a Migurd," Rudius said. "That takes a while." Roxy stared at him. I stared at him too. Rudius realized he had said that too casually and immediately looked like a man trying to stuff an entire previous life back into his mouth. I saved him because I was generous. So, I said, pointing at the dead boar, do we eat it or does it count as evidence? Paul laughed. Roxy did not. Zenith did, which was the important part. After that, my training changed. Paul started taking me seriously with the sword, which meant he stopped treating me like a strange child and started treating me like a strange child who might accidentally break his ribs. Roxy started measuring my mana output and frowning at the results. Rudius started watching me the way I had been watching him, carefully, with recognition hiding behind curiosity. 3 nights after the boar, he found me outside behind the house. I was holding a stick like a sword and trying to move without letting the template flood my muscles. Too little power and I was just a child pretending. Too much and the ground cracked under my heel. You're not normal, Rudius said. Neither are you. He froze. I turned the stick across my shoulders and grinned, because the template liked the pose, and because Rudius deserved at least one person who would not let him hide forever. Relax, I said. I am not going to make it weird. You just did. Yeah, but stylishly. That was the first time Rudius really laughed around me. We did not trade full life stories that night. We traded enough. Earth, death, waking up here, fear, confusion, the terrible awkwardness of being treated like children when our minds remembered bills, regret, and internet arguments. Rudius admitted he had been a shut-in. I admitted I had not been much better, just louder about it. He asked what my power was. I told him the truth in the least insane way possible. I have a template based on a demon hunter named Dante. The more I act like him, the more of his strength I can use. Rudius stared. Dante, like Devil May Cry. Exactly. How much do you have? 1%. He relaxed for half a second. 1% feels like holding a volcano by the handle, I added. He stopped relaxing. Good, he was smart. The next week became controlled disaster. Roxy taught us magic. Rudius excelled with terrifying discipline. I learned faster when I treated spells like sword swings, rhythm, intent, release. Paul taught swordsmanship. I copied forms too quickly and then ruined them by adding unnecessary spins. Stop spinning, Paul snapped. But it works. It will get you killed. I stepped aside from his practice strike, tapped his wrist with the wooden sword, and grinned. Hasn't yet. Paul's eye twitched. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.05%. That was the dangerous part. Being cocky worked. Not empty bragging, not stupidity, but confidence under pressure, jokes in the face of danger, style as a refusal to be ruled by fear. I could feel the power respond every time I chose that shape. So I made rules. No showing off near civilians. No lethal force against people unless they were active killers, and there was no cleaner way. Monsters that attacked people died. Demons, if this world had anything close enough to count, died harder. Surrender mattered unless it was a trick. Rudius listened when I told him. That sounds mature, he said. Do not spread rumors. He smiled, wouldn't dream of it. The second fight came from bandits, not monsters. They hit a merchant cart near the village road, 4 men with cheap blades and desperate eyes. Paul was away. The guards were slow. Rudius and I were close enough to hear the scream. I reached the road first. One man had a knife at the merchant's throat. Another had grabbed a girl by the arm. The other 2 were searching the cart. The template stirred. It offered violence like an easy song. I did not take all of it. I picked up a stone and flicked it through the wrist of the man holding the knife. Bone cracked. The knife dropped. Rudius hit the second man with a mud spell that swallowed his legs to the knee. I crossed the road, knocked the third unconscious with the flat of my practice sword, and put the fourth on his back before he finished turning. No one died. Not because I could not kill them. Because the merchant was alive, the girl was alive, and the bandits were no longer holding blades. Paul arrived 3 minutes later and found me sitting on the cart, legs swinging, while Rudius tried to look innocent beside 4 tied-up criminals. "Leon," Paul said slowly. "Good news," I said. "No dead bodies." Rudius coughed into his hand. Paul stared at the bandits, then at me, then at the cracked stone embedded in a tree. "That was you." Technically, the stone did most of the travel. Roxy, arriving behind him, looked at the scene and sighed. "I need stronger tea." The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.07%. Style rank, C**. Better. Still insulting. That night, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling while Rudius pretended to sleep across the room. 1% was already too much for this world. And something in my gut told me I was going to need every fraction anyway. Chapter 3. Control is a weapon asterisk. Roxy banned me from throwing anything sharper than a spoon for 1 week. Paul called that excessive until Zenith asked whether he wanted to explain another spear-shaped hole through a monster, a tree, and half the family's sense of normalcy. Paul decided spoons were reasonable. I considered protesting. Then I remembered I was 5, technically, and the last time I had thrown something with intent it had crossed a clearing like a divine punishment with a pointy end. So I trained with spoons. "This is humiliating," I said. Rudius sat on the grass nearby with his magic notebook open. "It is also funny. Betrayal from my own brother. Twin brother. That makes it worse." Roxy stood several paces away with a measuring slate, her staff tucked under one arm and her face set in the expression teachers used when students were about to become research problems. "Throw the spoon at the target," she said. "No mana reinforcement." Define no mana reinforcement. "Leon." "Fine." The target was a sack of straw tied to a post. I breathed in, felt the Dante template hum somewhere behind my ribs, and did nothing with it. That was harder than using it. Power wanted motion. It wanted style, timing, commitment. It wanted me to grin at danger and make the world regret underestimating me. But a straw target was not danger. Roxy was not a monster. Rudius was close enough that any mistake mattered. So I threw like a normal child. The spoon crossed 6 feet, hit the sack, and bounced off. Rudius clapped slowly. "I will remember this," I said. "Please do. It may keep the house standing." Roxy wrote something down. Again. We spent the morning proving I could be weak on purpose. That sounded stupid until I realized it might be the most important thing I had learned since waking up here. Strength was easy. 1% of Dante sat inside me like a sealed storm, and even the leak through the cracks made Paul's best swings feel readable, and Roxy's mana lessons feel like someone teaching a dragon how to cough sparks. Control was different. Control meant choosing how much of the storm became real. By noon, I could throw a spoon hard enough to stick in straw, soft enough not to punch through the post, and stylish enough that the template gave me absolutely nothing for it. Rudius laughed when I complained. "Maybe the system hates spoons," he said. "Everyone with taste hates spoons as weapons." Roxy looked at me. "You are not supposed to enjoy weapons at all." That was where the lesson became less funny. I lowered the next spoon. "Weapons are tools," I said. "Enjoying the tool is not the same as enjoying who it gets used on." Paul, who had been pretending not to listen from the porch, stopped sharpening his practice blade. Roxy's expression softened by a fraction. And who decides when it gets used? I do. That is a dangerous answer. So is letting someone else decide for me. Rudia stopped smiling. The Dante template pulsed once, quiet and approving. No synchronization increase. Not yet, but it listened. That afternoon, Paul took me to the training yard alone. No Rudius, no Roxy, no Zenith watching from the door, just Paul with two wooden swords and the look of a father trying very hard to pretend he was only a teacher. You are strong, he said, working on not being too strong. That is not what I mean. He tossed me the practice sword. I caught it without letting my fingers crush the grip. Progress. Strength changes people, Paul said. Especially boys. They start thinking every problem is just waiting to be hit. That sounds like experience talking. Paul winced. Too much. We sparred. He was better than me in ways raw power could not erase. Footwork, angles, timing born from years of real fights and bad decisions. If I used the template fully, even at 1%, I could overwhelm him. I knew it. He probably knew it too. So I did not. I fought at the level of a talented child. Then a skilled child. Then a child just barely fast enough to make Paul curse when I slipped his guard and tapped his ribs. The template did not reward me for winning. It rewarded me when Paul fainted high, cut low, and I laughed instead of panicking. I spun around the strike, landed badly, rolled through the dirt, came up with the wooden sword resting on my shoulder and said, "Nice try." The world clicked. Synchronization, 1.08%. Style rank, C***. Still C. Insulting. Paul stared. Did you just get faster? Motivation. That is not an answer. It keeps being accurate. He groaned, but his eyes were worried. That night, Rudius found me on the roof. Do not ask how two 5-year-olds got onto the roof. Rudius used magic. I used bad judgment and excellent balance. You scared them, he said. I know. You scare me too. That one landed. I looked at him. In the moonlight, Rudius looked like a child wearing an old wound behind his eyes. I wondered if I looked the same. I scare myself, I said. He blinked. 1% is not small, I continued. Not really. It is like someone gave me a key to a door and told me the ocean is on the other side. Rudius hugged his knees. Then why keep opening it? Because this world has things that will not stop just because we are children. He did not argue. We both knew too much about the future for that. I bumped his shoulder with mine. But I am making rules. No innocence. No killing people who surrender for real. Monsters that try to eat us die. Anyone trying to murder family gets one chance to stop if there is time. And if there is not. I looked at the dark line of the forest beyond the village. Then I make sure they do not get a second swing. Rudius was quiet for a long time. That sounds scary. Good. Good. Rules should be scary when they matter. The next morning, Roxy gave me my spoon back. It had a ribbon tied around it. For control, she said. I stared at it. Rudius started laughing so hard he fell over. The template did not chime. No style rank, no synchronization. Nothing. I held up the spoon like a sacred blade anyway. Fine, I said. This world gets one warning. Paul walked past, saw me posing with a ribboned spoon, and turned around without speaking. Zenith laughed from the kitchen. For one morning, the world felt small, bright, and almost safe. That was how I knew it would not last. Chapter 4. Roxy's Problem Student. Roxy started carrying 2 notebooks after the spoon incident. One was for Rudius. One was for me. That should have been flattering, except Rudius's notebook had clean spell diagrams, mana observations, and careful notes about silent casting. Mine had phrases like uncontrolled physical reinforcement, abnormal impact transfer, and possible danger to furniture. I felt judged. Accurately judged, but still. The worst part was that Roxy never sounded dramatic about it. If Paul called me terrifying, I could make a joke. If Zenith worried, I could hug her until she stopped looking like I had one foot in a grave. Roxy simply observed, wrote, tested, and adjusted. She treated my impossible strength like a problem that might become less impossible if measured from enough angles. That made her dangerous. Teachers who panicked could be dodged. Teachers who took notes built cages out of good intentions. Today, Roxy said, standing in the yard with the dignity of a woman preparing to teach two reincarnated disasters and not knowing the half of it, we are practicing water magic. Rudius looked delighted. I looked at the bucket. The bucket looked doomed. Leon, Roxy said, you will create a small water ball. Define small. Smaller than your head. My current head or my ego. Paul, watching from the porch, made a choking sound. Roxy closed her eyes. Your current head. The Dante template gave no chime, but I could feel it paying attention. It liked confidence. It liked performance. It liked when I turned fear into a grin and stepped forward anyway. Unfortunately, magic did not care about my timing as much as swordwork did. I gathered mana the way Roxy taught, shape, image, release. A water ball formed above my palm. For half a second it was perfect. Then it spun. The surface tightened like glass. The air screamed softly. The bucket exploded outward as the water ball shot through it, clipped the fence, and vanished into the field beyond with a sound like someone had slapped a pond with a thunderbolt. Silence followed. Rudius raised his hand. I think that was bigger than his head. Thank you, I said, very supportive. Roxy wrote in my notebook for a long time. Paul walked to the broken bucket, nudged a piece with his boot, and looked at me. Son. Yes. Please never become bored. I'll try. Roxy's next lesson was not about water, it was about stopping. That became the theme of the week. Stop gathering mana before it became a weapon. Stop swinging before instinct turned practice into injury. Stop joking before the joke became avoidance. Stop pretending power was simple just because I could make it look fun. I hated how useful the lessons were. Rudius helped more than he admitted. He could shape magic with delicate control I envied. He would form a water ball, flatten it into a disc, thread it into a ribbon, and let it fall like rain across the grass. Then I would try and make something that looked like a cannonball, pretending to be a raindrop. Your mana is too aggressive, Rudius said one evening. My mana has taste. Your mana destroyed a bucket. The bucket was weak. The bucket was innocent. I pointed the ribbon spoon at him. Do not use my own rules against me. He smiled, then make better rules. That stuck with me. Rules could not just be about when to kill. That was the dramatic part, the part stories cared about. Real restraint was smaller and more annoying. Do not crack the ground when stepping near civilians. Do not flood a yard because a spell felt cool. Do not scare family because being scary was easier than explaining fear. The template did not reward me for thinking that. It rewarded me 3 days later. Paul pushed me hard in sword practice, harder than before. He feinted, swept, pressed, and forced me backward until my heel hit the fence. I could have used more power. I could have ended the bout by moving faster than he could track. Instead, I let the fence stop me, dropped under his cut, tapped his ankle with my wooden sword, and rolled away with dirt in my hair. You look terrible, Rudius called. I stood, put the sword over my shoulder, and grinned at Paul. You should see the other guy. Paul looked down at his tapped ankle. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.09%. Style rank, C asterisk. Still C. I was beginning to take it personally. Roxy, however, looked less amused. After practice, she asked me to walk with her to the edge of the field. Leon, she said, you are holding back. Isn't that what everyone wanted? Yes, but I need to know whether you can stop holding back if something truly dangerous appears. I looked toward the forest. The memory of the boar was still there, the weight of the spear, the clean line between threat and family. Yes, I said. Roxy studied me. That answer came too easily. Because the rule is easy. If something tries to kill people who cannot stop it, I stop holding back. And if it is a person? I did not answer immediately. That mattered, Roxy noticed. If they can be stopped without killing, I stop them without killing, I said. If they are actively killing and there is no time, I end it. Roxy's face went very still. That is a heavy rule for a child. Good thing I'm weird. Roxy tapped her staff once against the grass. Then you need witnesses. For what? For your rules, people who know them before they are tested. That was not what I expected. She looked toward the house, where Rudius pretended not to be listening from a window and Paul pretended not to notice him. Power isolated from trust becomes a threat even when it means well. I wanted to make a joke. I did not. She did not laugh. Neither did I. That night, the template stayed silent, but I felt the storm behind the door settle into a shape I could understand. Power was easy. Control was a weapon. And one day, something would make me draw it fully. Chapter 5. The Red-Eyed Wolf. The next monster did not arrive like the boar. The boar had been loud, stupid, and direct. It crashed through trees because it had never learned subtlety and died because I was standing between it and Rudius. The wolf was different. It watched first. Rudius noticed the tracks near the north field, too large for a normal wolf, too deep in the soil, and burned slightly at the edges, as if heat leaked from the claws. Roxy went quiet when she saw them. Paul told Zenith to keep Lilia and the younger children inside. I looked at the tracks and felt the template stir. Not a chime. A warning. Monster, Rudius asked. Roxy nodded. Likely a mana-twisted wolf, maybe more than one. Paul drew his sword. Then we hunt it before it reaches the village. Zenith did not like that. I did not either, but for different reasons. I am coming, I said. No, Paul answered immediately. The word hit the yard, like a door slamming. I looked at him. He looked back like a father first and a swordsman second. Leon, he said, you are 5. The wolf does not care. I care. That landed harder than I expected. For a second, the cocky answer died in my mouth. Rudius looked between us, tense and silent. Roxy watched with the expression of someone who already knew the argument had no clean ending. If it comes here, I said carefully, I will fight anyway. Paul's jaw tightened. If I come with you, I fight where there are fewer civilians. That was the right argument, not pride, not showing off, protection. Paul hated that it was right. Roxy stepped in. He stays behind me unless necessary. I will bind his movement if he disobeys. You can do that, I asked. Would you like to test it? No, ma'am. The template approved of that for reasons I refused to examine. We found the wolf at dusk. It was larger than a horse, with black fur, red eyes, and steam curling from its mouth. 2 smaller wolves circled behind it, ribs visible under corrupted flesh. They had already killed a deer and half-burned the grass around the carcass. Paul moved first. He was fast, faster than most people in this world would ever be. His sword cut across the lead wolf's shoulder and drew black blood. Roxy raised a wall of earth to block one smaller wolf. Rudius, who had absolutely not been allowed to come and had absolutely followed us anyway, launched a stone cannon into the second. "Rudius," Paul shouted. "Later," Rudius shouted back. "Fair." The lead wolf lunged for Paul. I felt the 1% open. Not all of it, enough. The world sharpened. I saw the angle of the wolf's jaws, Paul's footing, Roxy's spell timing, Rudius too close to the second wolf as it staggered back up. The cleanest move was not the strongest. I stepped in, caught the lead wolf's attention with a thrown practice blade, and grinned when its red eyes snapped toward me. "Hey, bad dog." It charged. Good. Away from Paul, away from Roxy, away from Rudius. I waited until the last second, then moved under its bite and drove my fist into its ribs with controlled reinforcement. Not full power. Full power would have turned the clearing into a crater and maybe us with it. Controlled power broke the wolf's charge and threw it sideways into a tree. The template chimed. Style rank B. Finally. No time to celebrate. The second wolf broke free of Rudius's mud spell and went for him. Rudius froze for half a breath too long. I was too far. Paul was not. He cut the wolf across the neck and kicked Rudius back with the same motion. The third wolf escaped Roxy's earth wall and sprinted toward the village path. That one could not be allowed to run. I picked up Paul's dropped secondary blade. Roxy shouted, "Leon." I heard the warning in her voice, control. So I controlled it. I did not throw like the spear. I did not pour the storm through my arm. I breathed, set the line, and released only enough. The blade crossed the clearing and pinned the wolf through the skull before it reached the path. No crater. No shattered trees. Just a dead monster. The lead wolf rose again, broken ribs grinding, red eyes fixed on me. It was still dangerous, still moving, still choosing violence because monsters did not care about surrender, and this one had no mind left for anything else. I walked toward it. Paul shouted my name. I did not ignore him. I heard him. I measured the distance, the threat, the people behind me. Then I ended it. One clean strike to the skull with reinforced force. No flourish, no joke, no extra damage. The wolf died. The clearing went quiet, except for Rudius breathing too fast. The template chimed again. Synchronization, 1.11%. Style rank, B. I looked at the bodies and felt none of the thrill the template seemed to expect. Monsters dead, people alive. That was enough. Paul grabbed my shoulders hard enough to hurt. "You disobeyed," he said. Rudius disobeyed more. "Leon." His voice cracked on my name. I stopped joking. "I know," I said. Paul pulled me into a hug so tight my ribs complained. I let him. Rudius stood nearby, pale and guilty. Roxy looked at the dead wolf on the village path and then at me. "You controlled it," she said. I nodded. "Mostly." She sighed, but this time it sounded relieved. That night, no one celebrated. We burned the wolf bodies outside the village. Paul stayed quiet. Rudius apologized to everyone in increasingly awkward ways. Zenith hugged both of us and cried into our hair. I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling. 1.11%. Still almost nothing. Still enough to decide who lived in that clearing. The template whispered no words, but I understood the lesson anyway. Power did not make the rule. The rule decided where power went. Asterisk Chapter 6, After the Fire. The wolf bodies burned until sunrise. Black smoke curled above the village fields, bitter and oily, carrying the stink of corrupted mana with it. Nobody said much while the flames worked. Paul stood with his sword across his shoulder. Roxy kept one hand on her staff. Zenith held my hand like I might vanish if she loosened her grip. Rudius stood on my other side, looking at the fire instead of at Paul. That was how I knew he felt guilty. Normally, Rudius looked guilty everywhere at once. "You followed us," Paul said at last. Rudius flinched. I opened my mouth. Zenith squeezed my hand, hard enough to stop me. "Fair. I thought I could help," Rudius said. Paul's face tightened. "You could have died." "So could you." That was the wrong answer, and also the honest one. Paul turned away from the fire. "Both of you listen to me. Being talented does not make you adults." I looked at the dead wolves, burning down to bone and ash. "No," I said, "but monsters do not wait until we are adults." Paul looked at me then, and for once he did not have a quick reply. That did not make me feel clever. It made me feel tired. The fight had been clean by my rules. Monsters attacked. People were in danger. I killed the monsters. Rudius lived. Paul lived. Roxy lived. The village path stayed empty of blood that mattered. Simple. Except Zenith had cried into my hair for almost an hour. Paul had hugged me like he was checking whether bones could still break. Rudius kept staring at his hands. Roxy had said, "You controlled it," like a prayer she did not trust yet. Rules did not erase fear. That was annoying. After breakfast, Paul announced punishment. Rudius lost unsupervised practice for 2 weeks. I lost unsupervised practice for 2 weeks. I did not disobey, I said. Paul pointed at the burn pit outside. "You terrify your mother. That counts." That is not a legal system. It is my house. Hard to argue with monarchy. Roxy turned the punishment into lessons because teachers could make anything worse by making it useful. Rudius practiced basic spells under her direct watch. I practiced release control with wooden blocks, water cups, and one deeply unfortunate melon. The melon became a village rumor by lunch. That was not my fault. Lilia saw the first test, Zenith saw the second, and Paul described the third to a neighbor with too much enthusiasm for a man supposedly worried about my abnormal development. By dinner, I heard one of the stable boys whisper that I had defeated Fruit in single combat. I chose not to correct him. Some legends deserve to live. "Do not destroy the melon," Roxy said. "What did the melon do?" "It volunteered." Rudius snorted. I placed one finger against the melon and released the smallest thread of reinforced force I could manage. The melon split neatly in half. Roxy blinked. Paul, watching from the fence, said, "That was better." The melon disagrees. The melon is not paste. Progress, apparently, had low standards. The template did not chime for the melon. It did not care about careful fruit murder. It cared when Paul pushed me into another sparring lesson and I refused to meet force with force. He came in hard, testing whether last night's fight had made me eager. I stepped back. He pressed. I parried, turned, and let his momentum carry him past instead of trying to win. "Fight me," Paul snapped. "I am." "No, you are avoiding me." Avoiding getting hit is part of fighting. He came at me again, faster. I felt the storm behind the door. 1.11%. Not much by Dante's standards. More than enough to humiliate my father in front of the laundry line. I did not open it. Paul's wooden sword stopped an inch from my shoulder. "Why?" he asked. "Because I can win the wrong way." That made him lower the blade. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.12%. No style rank. I stared at the empty air. Seriously, that gets me a point. Roxy looked up from her notebook. "What happened?" The universe rewarded restraint. Rudius grinned. Maybe it is trying to civilize you. Rudius, I say this with brotherly affection. Betrayal suits you poorly. He kept grinning. That night, Rudius and I sat under the window while the house slept. I froze, he said. I did not pretend not to understand. For half a second. That is enough. Sometimes. You did not freeze. I leaned my head back against the wall. I had a monster to insult. Very different situation. Rudius did not laugh. So I stopped hiding behind the joke. I was scared, I said. The trick is not letting fear pick the move. He looked at me. Is that Dante? Some of it. And the rest. Me trying not to get people killed. Rudius hugged his knees. I do not want to waste this life. That was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. Then do not, I said. That easy. No, but simple and easy are different. The template stayed quiet. Good. Some moments did not need a reward. Rudius looked relieved when I said that. Maybe he had worried the template was turning every choice into a transaction. I had worried the same thing. Power that rewarded behavior could become a leash if I let it. So I made another private rule. If the system praised me, fine. If it stayed silent, fine. I would not start chasing chimes like a dog chasing bells. That thought felt important enough that I did not joke about it. The next morning, Roxy gave us both new training rules. Rudius would learn faster casting under stress. I would learn minimum force, mana shaping, and how to hold a blade without letting instinct turn every motion into a finishing move. Paul called it boring. Roxy called it necessary. I called it style practice because that annoyed both of them equally. By the end of the week, I could split a melon, dent a melon, tap a melon, and leave a melon completely unharmed. The last one was hardest. That was probably the point. Chapter 7, Style Practice. Roxy invented stress casting because she hated happiness. That was my official position. Rudius said that was unfair. Then Roxy made him recite spell theory while Paul threw pebbles near his feet, and he changed his mind. I apologize, he told me solemnly after the third pebble. She does hate happiness. Accepted. Roxy's ears twitched. I can hear both of you. Then hear our suffering, I said. Paul laughed until Roxy assigned him timing drills too. Her position was that Rudius and I had both proven we could make good decisions in calm lessons and questionable decisions when teeth were involved. Therefore, we needed practice while distracted, tired, annoyed, and ideally not destroying anything expensive. Paul approved immediately. Zenith approved after Roxy promised nobody would be set on fire. Lilia asked whether furniture counted as nobody. Roxy did not answer fast enough. The first exercise was simple. Rudius had to form water bullets while Paul shouted random sword drills at him. I had to dodge Paul's practice strikes while maintaining a tiny flame above one finger without letting it grow. Why fire? I asked. Because water only damages buckets, Roxy said. That was one time. 2 buckets. The second bucket had poor morale. Paul attacked before I finished the sentence. I ducked, kept the flame alive, and nearly singed my own hair when he swept low and forced me into a roll. Rudius laughed. His water bullet hit the fence. Roxy wrote both failures down with great satisfaction. The lesson got worse. Paul shouted false threats. Roxy changed the target distance. Rudius had to cast while I made jokes. I had to hold back while Rudius threw mud near my feet. The point was not victory. The point was keeping enough attention on the world that power did not become a tantrum with special effects. I hated it. I improved quickly. Both things could be true. The Dante template liked the parts where I stayed relaxed under pressure. It liked the grin, the timing, the refusal to let panic choose the move. It did not care for fake style. If I spun for no reason and lost balance, nothing happened except Paul hitting me with a wooden sword. "Style is not flailing," Paul said after the third hit. I lay on the grass, staring at the sky. That sounds like something a man with no dramatic instincts would say. Dramatic instincts get you hit. Evidence supports you temporarily. Rudius offered me a hand up. I took it. Then Roxy changed the lesson again. "Leon," she said, "you will spar Rudius." Rudius and I both looked at her. "No," Paul said immediately. "Yes," Roxy said. "No reinforcement above agreed limits, no attacks to the head, no killing intent. Rudius uses earth and water only. Leon uses movement and a wooden sword only." "I object to being trusted this much," I said. "Your objection is noted." Rudius looked nervous, but not unwilling. That mattered. He needed pressure that was not a monster lunging for his throat. I needed an opponent who could punish me if I relied on strength instead of control. We took positions. "Ready?" Roxy asked. "No," Rudius said. "Always," I said. Paul groaned. Rudius opened with mud. Smart, annoying, very Rudius. The ground softened under my feet. I stepped sideways before it could swallow my ankles, but he had expected that. A water bullet snapped toward my shoulder. I twisted away, let it pass, and closed half the distance. He retreated. Good. Rudius did not freeze this time. His eyes tracked me, wide but focused. He threw another mud patch, then a low stone ridge meant to trip me. I jumped it, spun because this time it actually changed my angle, and landed inside his guard with the wooden sword resting lightly against his chest. "Bang," I said. Rudius exhaled. Roxy nodded. Again. The second round, Rudius won. He faked the mud, used water to slick the grass, and let me overcommit to a dodge. My foot slid. A stone bullet stopped an inch from my stomach. Rudius looked shocked. I looked delighted. "Dirty," I said. "I am proud." The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.13%. Style rank, B. Roxy saw my expression. Increase. Tiny. Why? I looked at Rudius, who was trying not to smile too hard. Because he got me. Roxy frowned. Your power rewards losing. No, it rewards the right kind of fight. That answer did not satisfy her, but it satisfied me. Style was not just winning. Dante got hit. Dante joked. Dante adapted. Dante made a fight into a statement. Fear did not own the room. Rudius had just done that in his own way. That night, we trained again without adults. Not full spells, not full reinforcement, just footwork, timing, and quiet talk under the stars. "Do you think we change things?" Rudius asked. "We already did." "I mean the future." I looked toward the road beyond the village. Somewhere out there were people and disasters I remembered only in pieces. Turning points, deaths, the displacement incident waiting like a blade above the map. "Yes," I said. "For better. That depends on us." Rudius was quiet. I tapped the wooden sword against my shoulder. No pressure. He laughed softly. The template stayed quiet, but I felt the 1.13% settle more comfortably into my bones. Power was not getting safer. I was getting better at being its problem. Before we climbed down, Rudius asked one more question. "If something big happens, do we tell them what we know?" I knew what he meant, not the small truths, not Earth, not reincarnation, not the template, the future, the disasters waiting somewhere beyond our childhood. "Not all at once," I said. "Why?" "Because adults panic, when children sound like prophets. He considered that and grimaced. Fair. We prepare first, then we choose the moment. Rudius nodded, but neither of us looked satisfied. Some knowledge was heavier than power. Chapter 8, Future Wait. Rudius and I did not tell the adults about the future. Not yet. That decision sounded cowardly when I said it in my head. It sounded practical when I imagined Paul hearing that his 5-year-old sons knew pieces of disasters that had not happened yet, because both of them had died in another world and been reborn inside this one. Paul was many things. Calm was not usually one of them. So we prepared instead. Roxy noticed immediately. You are both being suspicious, she said 3 days after our roof conversation. Rudius looked up from his notebook with the face of a child who had absolutely never committed a thought crime. Suspicious how? You are cooperating. That seems unfair. It is extremely suspicious. I leaned on my wooden sword. Maybe we grew as people. Roxy looked at me. Fine, I said. Even I did not believe that. The truth was simpler and harder to explain. Rudius and I had started dividing problems. He wrote down what he remembered about magic, people, and turning points. I wrote down danger categories, monsters, human threats, political threats, things too large for children to fix directly, and things that might be changed early if we were careful. Rudius called my categories paranoid. Then he added 3 more. That was brotherhood. The Dante template did not react to planning. It did not care about lists, diagrams, or Rudius muttering over names he barely wanted to remember. It cared when planning became choice under pressure. Roxy created pressure. Her new exercise involved 3 targets, 1 false threat, and Paul swinging at me while Rudius had to protect a straw dummy labeled civilian without setting it on fire. Why am I always the one near fire? Rudius asked. Because Leon near fire becomes a property claim, Roxy said. I put a hand over my heart, cruel but supported by evidence. The drill began. Paul attacked, Rudius cast. Roxy shouted changes. I moved, dodged, and kept one eye on the straw dummy. The false threat was a sack falling from a tree. The real threat was Paul changing targets halfway through and lunging toward the dummy. I almost opened the storm. Almost. Instead, I stepped between Paul and the dummy, caught his wooden sword against mine, and let my knees bend instead of pushing back with full force. The impact rattled my arms. Good. Pain meant I had not overpowered him. Civilian lives, I said. Paul pressed harder. You are dead. I object. Dead people object quietly. Rudius hit Paul in the shoulder with a mud bullet. Paul froze. Roxy wrote something down. I looked at Rudius. He looked at me. Teamwork, he said. Paul wiped mud off his shirt. Betrayal. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.14%. Style rank, B. I stared at the empty air. Roxy lowered her notebook. Another increase. Tiny. Why? I considered lying. Then I remembered what she had said about witnesses. Because I protected the dummy without crushing Dad, and Rudius helped without panicking. Paul looked wounded. I was the villain. You attacked a straw civilian. For training. Villains have excuses too. Zenith, watching from the porch, laughed into her hand. That laugh mattered. The house had been tense since the wolf fight. For a moment, tension loosened. Paul grumbled. Rudius smiled. Roxy pretended not to be pleased. Then a rider came from the village road, with news of another monster sighting farther north. Not close, not immediate, but close enough that the adults stopped smiling. The report said 3 travelers had found claw marks near an old shrine. No bodies, no attack, just signs of something large moving through the trees. Paul wanted to investigate. Roxy wanted information first. Zenith wanted everyone to stop finding reasons to walk toward monsters. I wanted the same thing as Zenith and knew I would not get it. Rudius looked at me across the yard. We both understood the shape of the problem. If we pushed too hard, the adults would shut us out. If we said nothing, they might walk into something we could have helped prepare for. So I chose a smaller truth. If you go, I said, take both magic and swords. The wolf pack watched before it attacked. If this one is similar, it may be testing roads. Paul frowned. That is a strange conclusion. But not a bad one, Roxy said. She studied me for a long moment, too long. I gave her my best, innocent smile. It failed. Leon, she said later, when the others had gone inside, you think like someone who has seen more fights than a child. Maybe I am talented. You are talented. That is not the answer. The easy joke was right there. I left it alone. I remember dying, I said. Roxy went still. Not the whole truth, not Earth, not the template, not Rudius, but a real piece. Before this life, she asked quietly. Yes. The words sat between us. Roxy did not ask 10 questions. That was why I had chosen her for the first piece. Does Rudius remember too? I looked toward the house. Ask him when he is ready. Roxy nodded slowly. And your power? Mine. That is not an answer. It is the answer I can give today. She accepted that with visible difficulty. Progress. That night, Rudius was not happy with me. You told her. A piece. Why? Because adults panic when children sound like prophets. They panic less when children sound haunted. He stared at me. That is awful logic. Correct logic is not always charming. Rudius sat beside me on the floor. Did she believe you? Yes. Are we telling Paul? Not yet. Zenith. I thought about her crying into my hair after the wolf fight. Not yet. We sat quietly after that. The future still waited. The displacement incident, dangerous people, gods, wars, and all the things I only half remembered from a story that was now dirt under my feet and family sleeping down the hall. The template stayed silent. Good. This was not about style. This was about choosing who got enough truth to help without breaking under it. Outside, something howled far north of the village. Not close. Close enough. I reached for the ribbon spoon beside my bed. Rudius saw it and whispered, Really? What? It is my emotional support weapon. He put his face in his hands. The fear did not vanish, but it became easier to carry when he laughed. Chapter 9, North Field Warning. Paul did not let us investigate the northern howl. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was thinking Rudius, and I would accept that because he said it loudly. To be fair, we did accept it in the ways that mattered. We did not sneak out. We did not follow him into the trees. We did not do anything that would make Zenith cry into our hair again, which had become my new standard for whether an idea was only stupid or historically stupid. Instead, we prepared. Rudius mapped the area from memory and village gossip. Roxy added monster behavior notes. I added routes, choke points, likely civilian paths, and a column labeled places Leon should not use too much force unless everyone enjoys rebuilding roads. Roxy read that last column twice. At least you are thinking about it, she said. Growth. Do not sound proud of nearly destroying roads you have not reached. Measured pride. Rudius snorted into his notebook. The adults left at dawn, Paul, 2 village hunters, and Roxy. She argued against going until she realized Paul would go without a mage if she refused. Zenith stayed behind with us and pretended not to watch the road every 5 minutes. I lasted until breakfast before hating the waiting. The template stayed quiet. No chime for patience. No reward for not doing the reckless thing. That was fine. I did not want to become the kind of person who needed applause for basic restraint. Rudius found me in the yard, balancing the ribboned spoon on one finger. You look ridiculous. I look centered. You look like a child, losing an argument to cutlery. The spoon is a worthy opponent. He sat beside me. Do you think they will be okay? Yes. Was that confidence or a lie? Yes. He accepted that because he understood. Paul returned near noon with blood on his sleeve. Not his. That was the first thing he said because Zenith had already gone pale. The second thing he said was that the monster was not dead. That made the yard colder. What is it? Rudius asked. Roxy answered instead of Paul. Her hat was torn at the brim, and her face had the exhausted stillness of someone who had spent mana too quickly. A horned bear, probably mana warped, larger than normal, too smart. It retreated after testing us. Testing? I asked. Paul looked at me. It attacked, withdrew, circled, and tried to draw us toward a ravine. Predator behavior. Not stupid. Bad. One hunter had a broken arm. Another had claw marks across his back. Roxy had burned the bear's shoulder, but it had not slowed the way a normal beast should have. It was still north of the village, wounded, intelligent enough to set terrain, and angry. That was not a problem for children. Unfortunately, I was not only a child. Zenith saw my face change and gripped my shoulder. Leon. I know. Do you? I looked at her hand, then at Paul cleaning someone else's blood off his sleeve. I know I am not running into the forest. She held my gaze. Without permission, I added. Her expression did not improve. Roxy called a meeting in the yard because the house felt too small for the amount of danger being discussed. Paul wanted to gather more hunters. Roxy wanted traps and distance. Rudius suggested layered earth walls near the North Road, then looked surprised when everyone listened. I suggested bait. Everyone looked at me. Not people, I said quickly. Meat, blood, noise. If it tests roots, give it a route we choose. Paul's jaw tightened. You are not bait. I said meat. You meant yourself, eventually. I did not answer fast enough. Zenith made a sound I did not like. So I changed the plan. Use the boar pit, I said. The old charcoal ditch near the north field. Reinforce the sides with earth magic. Roxy and Rudius create distance traps. Paul and the hunters hold the road. I stay behind the first line unless it breaks. Roxy studied me, and if it breaks, then I make sure it breaks on me, not the village. Nobody liked that. Nobody had a better answer. The plan took the afternoon. Rudius worked until sweat stuck his hair to his forehead. Roxy corrected his earth walls and praised him once, which made him stand straighter for 10 minutes. Paul set spear lines and taught the hunters where not to stand. Zenith helped prepare bandages with the fury of someone denied a sword. I practiced not opening the storm. That was the strangest part. Everyone else prepared to use more. I prepared to use less until less stopped being enough. The horned bear came at dusk. It moved between trees like a piece of night with antlers. Too large, too quiet. One shoulder burned black from Roxy's spell. Its eyes locked on the meat in the ditch, then on the people behind the barricade. It understood the trap. Then it charged anyway. The first earth wall held for half a second. The second held longer. Rudius screamed a spell and pulled mud around its legs. Roxy drove stone spikes up near its flank, not into the heart, guiding it toward the ditch. Paul struck its wounded shoulder and nearly lost his sword when it twisted. Then the bear turned toward the road, toward Zenith aid station. The line broke. I moved. Not full power, not rage, not the whole storm. Enough. I crossed the ditch, slammed my shoulder into the bear's chest, and felt the impact crawl through my bones like thunder. The ground cracked under my heels. The bear stumbled back instead of forward. Good. Away from the road. It roared in my face. Yeah, I said through clenched teeth. Bad breath, too. The template chimed. Style rank B. The bear swiped. I ducked under the claws and hit the burned shoulder with a reinforced palm strike. Controlled, focused, ugly. The joint snapped. The bear dropped low, still alive, still dangerous, still trying to drag itself toward anything soft enough to kill. No surrender, no mind left for mercy. Monster. Rule clear. I took Paul's fallen spear from the mud and drove it through the base of the skull. The bear died. The clearing held its breath. Then Rudius threw up behind an earth wall. Fair. The template chimed again. Synchronization, 1.16%. I stared at the dead bear. That was only worth 0.02. Paul made a strangled sound that might have been horror or laughter. Roxy sat down hard in the grass. Zenith ran to me, checked my face, my arms, my ribs, and then hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I let her. Because this time I had permission. And everyone was alive. Chapter 10, Permission. Permission did not make the aftermath easy. That was the first thing I learned after killing the horned bear. The village treated me like a hero for approximately 12 minutes. Then Paul told everyone to stop crowding the children. Zenith started crying again. Roxy ordered 3 people to fetch clean cloth, and Rudius sat on a fence post looking like his soul had left to file a complaint. The bear was dead. The hunters were alive. The road held. No civilian had been hurt. By my rules, that was victory. By my ribs, it was an argument. The bear had hit harder than anything I had faced since waking in this world. Even controlled reinforcement had not stopped the force from traveling through me. My shoulder ached. My hands shook when I thought no one was looking. Roxy noticed. Of course she noticed. Sit, she said. I am standing with style. Sit with style. I sat. Rudius laughed weakly from the fence. Roxy checked my arm, then my mana flow, then my eyes. Paul watched like he wanted to punch the dead bear again for being dead in the wrong way. Zenith hovered until Lilia gently redirected her toward the injured hunters. You controlled the engagement, Roxy said quietly. Mostly. Do not make that a joke. I stopped smiling. She looked toward the dead bear. You waited until the line broke. You redirected it away from the road. You used lethal force after it remained an active threat. That is the rule. And you followed it. The words should have felt good. They did, a little. They also felt heavy. Paul came over after the hunters secured the carcass. He crouched in front of me, which was strange because Paul almost never made himself smaller on purpose. You asked, he said. What? You waited. You gave the plan a chance. You moved when it failed. That sounds like praise. Do not ruin it. Trying not to. Paul exhaled. I am still angry. That sounds familiar. And proud. That one shut me up. The template did not chime. Good. Some things were not for it. That night, the adults argued after they thought Rudius and I were asleep. Their voices carried through the walls in pieces. Paul wanted more training. Zenith wanted fewer monsters. Roxy wanted structure before fear made decisions for them. Lilia said nothing for a long time, then quietly pointed out that the village now knew something was different about me. That was the problem. Nobody could kill with a spear. People had seen me stop the bear. Not all of it, not the template, not the storm behind the door. Enough. Rudius whispered from his bed. This changes things. Everything changes things. You know what I mean. I did. Before I was strange inside the house. Now the village had watched a 5-year-old throw himself into a monster's path and win. Stories would grow. They always did. We need a normal explanation, Rudius said. I am obviously a prodigy. That is not normal. In this family, it is getting there. He snorted. Then he went quiet. Do you think Roxy will tell anyone what you told her? No. Why? Because she is scared enough to be careful. That sounded cruel, but I meant it as respect. The next morning, Roxy proved me right. She gathered Paul, Zenith, Rudius, and me at the kitchen table. Lilia stood near the door with her hands folded, pretending she was not part of the family conversation while absolutely being part of it. Leon requires a cover story, Roxy said. Paul choked on his tea. Zenith stared. Roxy continued. The village saw enough to gossip. If no explanation exists, people will invent worse ones. What explanation? Zenith asked. Man-enhanced physical talent, combined with early sword training. Paul blinked. That is true. Incomplete truth is stronger than a lie. I pointed at Roxy. That is why she is terrifying. Roxy ignored me. Rudius will also need one eventually, but silent casting is easier to hide for now. Rudius looked deeply offended by being labeled easier. Paul rubbed his face. So we tell people Leon is naturally gifted. Gifted and dangerous if pushed too quickly, Roxy said. That will discourage challenges. Will it? I asked. Everyone looked at me. Right. This world. Gifted children attracted teachers, patrons, rivals, kidnappers, and idiots who wanted to test legends. We need boring gifted, I said. Paul pointed at me. Yes, be boring. I cannot promise miracles. Zenith sighed like she had aged 5 years in one breakfast. The plan became simple. More supervised training. Fewer public displays. If anyone asked, Paul had been training me hard. Roxy had identified unusual mana reinforcement, and the bear had already been wounded before I landed the finishing blow. All true. Carefully arranged. Rudius leaned toward me while the adults debated details. This is how conspiracies start. Family bonding. We are terrible children. Speak for yourself. I am delightful. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.17%. I froze. Rudius noticed. What? Apparently, the template appreciates cover story maintenance. He stared at me. Or being delightful, I added. I hate your power. Jealousy is ugly. Roxy snapped her fingers. Focus. We focused. Mostly. The rest of the day was quieter than I expected. Paul trained me on footwork and retreat. Roxy made me practice holding mana without releasing it. Zenith watched from the porch with a sewing basket she barely touched. At sunset, she called me over. I expected another hug. I got one. Then she pulled back and looked me in the eyes. You are my son, she said. My throat tightened. I know. Whatever you remember, whatever power you have, whatever danger comes, you are my son first. The world became very still. I had no joke for that. So I nodded. Zenith hugged me again. The template stayed silent. Good. Some truths were bigger than style. That night far north beyond the fields, nothing howled. For once, silence felt earned. Chapter 11. Boring Gifted. Being boring gifted turned out to be impossible. We tried. Paul told the village I had unusual mana reinforcement and too much confidence for my own good. Roxy confirmed it with enough technical language to make people's eyes glaze over. Zenith smiled politely and redirected every curious neighbor towards safer topics like harvest schedules, weather, and whether Paul had always been this dramatic. For about 2 days, it worked. Then a farmer asked if I could lift a cart. No, Paul said. Maybe, I said at the same time. Paul looked at me. No, I corrected. The farmer walked away, unconvinced. That was the problem with incomplete truth. It worked only if everyone agreed not to poke it with a stick. Villagers, apparently, loved sticks. Roxy adjusted training again. Less spectacle, more discipline, more tasks that looked normal from a distance and miserable up close. Carry water without spilling it while Paul attacked. Hold a candle flame steady while Rudius changed the wind. Cut falling leaves without using reinforcement. Stand still while Zenith checked whether my clothes needed mending because I had grown too fast again, which was not training, but somehow required more courage than the bear. The template did not reward any of it. That was fine. Mostly. You keep looking annoyed at empty air, Rudius said during one break. The empty air is being disrespectful. Your system. It gives ranks for style, but apparently not for domestic survival. Rudius glanced toward Zenith, who was measuring my sleeve length with terrifying focus. Domestic survival is harder. Correct. The actual problem came from Paul. He had stopped treating my restraint like a temporary trick and started building lessons around it. That sounded good. It was good. It was also exhausting. Again, he said, after knocking my wooden sword aside. You say that like I enjoy losing. You enjoy talking while losing. Everyone needs a hobby. Again. This time he attacked faster. I stepped back, blocked, turned, and saw the opening. A clean line to his ribs. A win if I used even a little too much speed. I did not take it. Paul noticed. He stopped the bout. Why? Too easy. That is not an answer. It was the wrong win. He lowered his sword. Explain. I rolled my shoulder and tried to find words that did not sound insane. If I win by using strength you cannot answer, I learn nothing except that I am stronger. I know that already. Paul stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not his usual grin, smaller, sadder. That is the first thing you have said that makes me less afraid of your talent. I did not know what to do with that, so I pointed the wooden sword at him. Again. Paul laughed. The template chimed. Synchronization, 1.18%. I froze. Paul's smile vanished. Increase. Tiny. For refusing the wrong win. Seems like. Roxy, who had absolutely been listening from the shade, wrote so fast I worried for the paper. By afternoon, the lesson became official. Winning badly was failure. Losing usefully was progress. Winning cleanly was ideal. Winning stylishly without endangering anyone was apparently the thing my soul considered nutritious. Rudius called it combat ethics with dramatic footwork. I called it Tuesday. The village rumors did not vanish, but they changed shape. People stopped asking whether I could lift carts and started saying Paul was training both sons hard because monsters had grown bold near the north field. That was useful, true enough, boring enough. Then Roxy ruined dinner. Not intentionally. She waited until Zenith had served stew. Paul had taken his second helping, and Rudius had relaxed enough to look like a child instead of a disguised old man. I will be leaving soon, she said. The spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. Rudius went very still. Paul looked surprised, but not shocked. Zenith looked sad in a way that said she had known this was coming. I hated all of that immediately. How soon? Rudius asked. Not tomorrow, Roxy said, but soon. You have both advanced beyond what I was originally hired to teach, and staying forever would not help you grow. It would help my mood, I said. Her mouth twitched. That is not the same. Rudius looked down at his bowl. I knew this part of the story. Roxy left. Rudius struggled with the outside world. Life moved. People changed. Knowing did not make it softer. After dinner, I found Roxy packing notes in the study. You are really leaving. Eventually. That is a teacher answer. It is the only one I have. I leaned against the doorframe. Are we ready? Roxy did not answer quickly. That was rude, but honest. No, she said, but ready is not a place people reach before life changes. I hated that too. She closed one notebook and handed it to me. Mine. The problem student notebook. Keep this. I opened it. The first pages were exactly as judgmental as I remembered. Later pages changed. Less abnormal danger, more controlled restraint, less possible threat to furniture, more developing ethical framework. You made me sound boring, I said. You asked to be boring gifted. Not in writing. Roxy looked at me carefully. Leon, whatever you remember and whatever your power is, do not let either become a reason to stop listening. That one hit clean. I will try. Do better than try. Bossy. Alive. Fair. She hesitated, then tapped the notebook cover. Also, your brother watches you more than he watches Paul. Rudius watches everyone. Not like that. I did not answer. Roxy's voice softened. If you make recklessness look heroic, he will learn recklessness. If you make restraint look like cowardice, he will hide his fear until it breaks something. You are not only training yourself. That was unfair. It was also true, which made it worse. No pressure, I said. Plenty of pressure, Roxy corrected. That is why control matters. That night, the template stayed silent. I sat with the notebook open beside the ribboned spoon and understood the next threat was not a monster. It was change. Annoyingly, I could not stab that. Chapter 12, The Leaving Lesson *. Roxy announced she was leaving over breakfast, which was rude because breakfast was supposed to be a peaceful time for bread, soup, and pretending nothing in life changed, unless Paul shouted about it. She did not make it dramatic. That made it worse. I will remain through the end of the week, Roxy said, hands folded neatly in front of her bowl. After that, I will continue my travels. Rudius froze with his spoon halfway to his mouth. I kept eating for exactly 3 seconds because I was brave, mature, and committed to looking completely unaffected. Then I bit the inside of my cheek. Zenith noticed. Of course she noticed. Mothers had evil powers. Paul leaned back in his chair and tried to look casual. Well, you have done more than we asked. The boys are alive, educated, and only slightly terrifying. That is not a grade I would put in writing, Roxy said. Coward. Accurate. Rudius laughed once, but it was thin. He looked at Roxy like she had just told him the roof was leaving. I understood that feeling. Roxy had arrived as a teacher. Somewhere between the first lecture and the first time she calmly explained how to avoid killing someone with mana reinforcement, she had become something harder to name. Not family, exactly. Close enough that losing her from the house left a shape behind. The template stayed quiet. Good. If it had given me a style bonus for emotional damage, I might have thrown it into the well. After breakfast, Roxy took us outside for training. No dramatic speech, no final secret technique, No glowing spell circle full of destiny and questionable safety standards. She placed 3 wooden cups on the fence. Knock down the middle cup without touching the others, she said. Rudius raised a hand. With water. With anything you can control. I looked at the cups. Can I throw Paul? From the yard, Paul shouted, No. He answered too fast, I said. Roxy pointed at the cups. Leon. Fine. Rudius went first. His water bullet struck the center cup cleanly enough to make Roxy nod. Then the splash knocked over the left cup. He winced. Too much spread. Correct, Roxy said. Again. He tried again. Better, not perfect. Then it was my turn. At 1% and change, the world always felt too thin around my hands, like I could tear through it by accident if I moved too quickly. That was the horrible joke of my power. It was not that I could not break things. Breaking things was easy. Not breaking them took work. I raised one finger. The center cup exploded. Rudius stared at the splinters. Roxy closed her eyes. I lowered my hand. Technically, it fell. Technically, Roxy said, you murdered a cup. It knew what it did. Again. The next hour was humiliation disguised as education. Rudius learned to narrow his water until it tapped the cup instead of slapping it. I learned that flicking air with Dante-flavored reinforcement was a terrible idea unless I wanted to create high-speed carpentry. Roxy made me stand closer. Then closer. Then close enough that power was useless, because if I overdid it, the fence would break under my own hand. You keep thinking distance makes control easier, she said. Distance makes witnesses safer. Sometimes, other times distance lets you lie to yourself about how much force you used. That shut me up. She placed a fresh cup on the fence and stood beside it. Rudius went pale. Roxy. He will not hit me. I stared at her. That is a stupid amount of trust. No, it is an informed amount. Roxy looked at me without blinking. You are reckless with yourself. You are not reckless with people you have decided to protect. My throat went tight. I hated when adults said accurate things in calm voices. The template stirred faintly in the back of my mind. Not a notification, not a number, just a tension. I breathed in. No jokes. No showing off. No pretending I was Dante, because I liked the coat and the attitude and the idea of being untouchable. The cup was a cup. Roxy was Roxy. My hand was mine. I tapped the wood. The center cup tipped over and landed in the grass. The cups beside it remained standing. Rudius exhaled like he had been underwater. Roxy nodded once. Again. So I did it again. And again. By noon, I could knock the middle cup down 10 times in a row without breaking the fence, the cup, or my teacher. It sounded like a small victory because it was. It also felt harder than killing the horned bear. The template finally spoke. Dante template synchronization, 1.19%. Style rank stable, B. No new weapon, no grand reward, just a number small enough to be insulting and large enough to terrify me. Rudia saw my face change. Increase. Tiny one. That means awful things. Usually. Roxy collected the cups, then remember what earned it. Not exploding dinnerware. Choosing restraint when showing off would have been easier. I looked away. Rudius sat beside me under the tree after training. For a while, neither of us said anything. Paul was teaching Zenith how to hold a practice sword badly enough to make her laugh. Roxy was packing books into a travel bag with the same careful hands she used for spell diagrams. I don't want her to go, Rudius said. Yeah. In my old life, I was bad at people leaving. Same. He looked at me. You had people. I shrugged, enough to know I wasted time. That was more honesty than I had planned to give. It landed between us quietly. Rudius did not pry. Good brother. We should make her something, he said. A statue of me. Something useful. So, a smaller statue of me. He shoved my shoulder. I let him. That evening, we gave Roxy a notebook. Rudius filled the first half with spell observations, little improvements, and careful diagrams. I filled the second half with control drills, danger rules, and a list titled things Leon is not allowed to do unless everyone agrees the situation is terrible. Roxy read the title and stared at me. It is a living document, I said. It had better be. She hugged Rudius first. He cried and pretended he did not. Then she hugged me. I did not cry. My eyes simply made a tactical error. You are not Dante, she said softly. I know. Good, be Leon first. I had no joke for that either. The week was not over yet. Roxy had not left yet. There were still lessons, still meals, still mornings where her staff leaned beside the door. But change had already entered the house. This time, I did not reach for a weapon. I reached for control. Chapter 13, Smile Through the Sword. Paul decided my last week with Roxy should include more sword training. That sounded unrelated until he explained himself, at which point it became worse. You are getting too comfortable solving problems with weird strength, he said, standing across from me in the yard with a wooden sword over his shoulder. So today you fight like a normal kid. I looked at Rudius. Is he allowed to insult me like that? Rudius smiled weakly from the fence. I think he believes it is parenting. Cruel world. Paul tossed me a practice sword. No reinforcement, no template, no invisible tricks. Feet, hands, eyes, timing. Can I use charm? You have none. I gasped. Zenith, did you hear that? From the porch, Zenith lifted her sewing without looking up. I heard truth. Betrayal came from every direction. Roxy stood beside Rudius with her staff in hand. She had 3 days left before leaving, and she had become more severe the closer that day came. Not colder, more careful, like every lesson had to carry enough weight to survive after she was gone. Paul attacked. I lost instantly. Not dramatically, not heroically. He stepped in, tapped my wrist, hooked my ankle, and put me on my back in the dirt before I had time to say anything clever. The sky looked offensively blue. Paul leaned over me. Again. I am having a spiritual moment. Have it standing. The second round lasted longer because I ran away. That was not cowardice. That was tactical relocation. Unfortunately, Paul had longer legs and no respect for terminology. He caught me near the fence and tapped the wooden sword against my shoulder. Dead. Wounded, I corrected. Dead. Emotionally. Physically. Rudius covered his mouth. Roxy did not. She watched like she was recording every mistake for later. The third round, I stopped joking. That helped. Not enough. Without reinforcement, my body was just a child body. Fast for my age, strong for my age, but still small. Paul was an adult swordsman who had spent years turning bad decisions into muscle memory. The only reason he did not fold me in half was because Zenith would have made him sleep outside. I started seeing the lesson after the 5th loss. Power made me impatient. When I had even a sliver of Dante's strength, I expected the world to answer when I moved. I expected threats to break. I expected my confidence to be enough because style rewarded confidence. Paul punished every assumption. He feinted high, and I flinched. He stepped slow, and I overreacted. He smiled, and I attacked because I hated that he looked relaxed. His wooden sword touched my chest. Dead. I spat dirt. You are enjoying this too much. A little. Roxy finally spoke. He is teaching you something important. That fathers are evil. That enemies do not care how impressive your power is if they can make you use it poorly. Paul pointed his sword at her. Exactly. Do not look so proud, she said. You are still being smug. I earned it. Debatable. Rudius laughed properly at that, which made the dirt in my mouth almost worth it. Almost. Paul gave me one last round before lunch. Same rules. I took position. No reinforcement. No template. No trying to be a half-sized devil hunter, because it sounded cooler than being a scared kid with too much power. Paul advanced. This time, I did not rush. I watched his shoulders. His weight shifted before his sword moved. He wanted me to bite on the high feint again. I let my eyes follow it, but I kept my feet still. His real strike came low. I barely blocked it. The impact numbed my hands. My sword nearly flew away, but nearly was not the same as losing. Paul's eyebrows lifted. That tiny surprise was enough. I stepped inside, not to win, not to hurt him, just to ruin the angle of his next attack. My shoulder bumped his stomach. My wooden sword touched his ribs. Lightly. Controlled. For one glorious second, nobody moved. Then Paul grinned. Hit. I lowered my sword. Not dead. Not dead. Frame this day. Do not get arrogant. Too late. Roxy nodded once. Better you waited. I was tempted to cheat. I know. That obvious. Painfully. Rudius walked over with a cup of water. You actually did it without the template. I drank, then passed the cup back. I am amazing even when tragically limited. You got beaten 12 times. 13 is lucky. You are impossible. And yet, beloved. He rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. After lunch, Roxy made Rudius teach me a spell concept instead of teaching it herself. He became serious so fast it almost hurt to watch. My brother was still ridiculous, still nervous, still carrying memories that made him older and younger at the same time. But when he explained mana compression, he sounded like someone building a future with his bare hands. I listened. Mostly. Leon, Roxy said. I am listening. Repeat what he said. Mana should be compressed carefully, because if you push too much into too small a shape, Rudius makes the face he makes when he realizes consequences exist. Rudius sighed. That is not the wording. But is it wrong? Roxy considered. Annoyingly, no. We practiced until sunset. Rudius shaped water. I shaped force without letting it become a hammer. Paul made dinner badly enough that Zenith took the knife away from him. For a little while, the house felt normal. That made Roxy's packed bag by the door harder to look at. I found her outside after everyone else went in. She stood under the evening sky, staff in one hand, eyes fixed on the road beyond the village. You know, I said, you could stay. I could. That was the part where you agree. No. Rude but clean. I stood beside her. There are things I need to learn elsewhere, she said, and things you need to learn without me correcting every mistake before it matters. That sounds dangerous. It is. Terrible teaching method. Effective life method. I hated that. She looked at me then. When you kill, make sure it is because protecting someone required it, not because the power made the answer easy. The yard seemed quieter. I know my rule, I said. Rules written in calm moments are tested in ugly ones. The template stirred again, faint and watchful. I smiled because that was easier than admitting she had hit something tender. I will be stylish about it. Be good first. Those can overlap. Make sure they do. 3 days left. I thought power would make goodbyes easier. It did not. 1% of Dante could crack monsters open, sharpen my reflexes, and make impossible violence feel close enough to touch. It could not make someone stay. So I stood beside my teacher and watched the road with her. For once, I did not try to win. Chapter 14. Last Morning Lessons. Roxy's last full day in the Greyrat house began with Paul trying to make pancakes. This was not a normal disaster. This was a focused, ambitious disaster with smoke, flour on the ceiling, and Zenith standing beside the stove with the expression of a woman deciding whether marriage counted as a permanent contract. Rudius stared into the kitchen. Should we help? No, I said. We should learn. Learn what? That confidence without skill is just arson with posture. Paul turned around holding a pan. I heard that. Good, it was educational. Roxy walked in, saw the smoke, and paused. For one strange second, she looked like she might turn around and leave early. Then she sighed. I will prepare breakfast. Paul surrendered the pan with heroic speed. That was the shape of the morning. Everyone trying to act normal while the house quietly revolved around the fact that Roxy's bag was packed by the door. After breakfast, she brought Rudius and me to the field behind the house. No cups this time, no pebbles, no melon targets, just 3 circles drawn in the dirt. Today is review, she said. Rudius mana shaping, Leon restraint, both of you judgment. Judgment sounds like the part where adults tell children not to do interesting things, I said. Often because the interesting things are foolish. Subjective. Usually measurable by property damage. Rudius gave me a look. She has data. Traitor. Roxy pointed to the first circle. A wolf enters the field. It is sick, hungry, and moving toward a child. What do you do? Rudius answered first. Create a barrier or use earth magic to redirect it. If it continues, disable it. Roxy looked at me. If it is attacking a child and cannot be stopped safely, I kill it. How? Fast, clean, away from the child. Good, second circle. A thief steals bread and runs. Paul chases him because Paul needs exercise, I said. From the fence, Paul shouted, still hearing you. Roxy did not smile, but her eyes threatened to. Leon. Stop him if I can do it safely. No killing, no maiming. Bread theft is not a death sentence. Third circle. Bandits attack the house at night. One drops his weapon and begs. Another moves toward Zenith with a knife. The field went quiet. Rudius swallowed. I looked at the dirt circles, at the line between them, at the places where easy answers went to die. The one with the knife dies if I cannot stop him another way in time, I said. The one begging lives unless it is a trick. Roxy watched me for a long moment. And if killing the armed one gives you more template power? That does not matter. It might feel like it matters. Then I ignore it. Can you? I wanted to say yes instantly. That would have sounded good, stylish even. Instead, I remembered the horned bear, the red-eyed wolves, the hot rush of knowing I could end a threat before anyone else even understood it. I can if I practice before it happens, I said. Roxy nodded. That is the correct answer. The template remained silent, which was probably wise. If it had rewarded me for self-awareness, I would have become unbearable. Rudius practiced barriers next. He was better than he thought and worse than he wanted, which made him scowl at the ground like the dirt had personally betrayed him. I practiced stopping at 1 inch. Paul held a stick in front of me. I had to strike toward it and halt before touching it. No reinforcement at first, then a thread of reinforcement, then enough power to make the air tense around my fist. Stopping was ugly work. Moving felt natural. Moving promised results. Moving let me pretend fear was momentum. Stopping meant feeling every part of myself and choosing not to finish. I failed 6 times. The stick snapped twice. Paul replaced it with a thicker branch and said nothing. That helped more than advice would have. On the 7th try, my fist stopped close enough that the branch trembled from the air pressure alone. Roxy stepped beside me, again. You love that word. It is a useful word. Cruel word. Again. So I did it again. By sunset, my arms shook. Rudius looked half asleep on his feet, and Paul had declared himself emotionally wounded by how many branches I had destroyed. Zenith brought water out to us. She handed mine over and looked at Roxy. Will you visit? Zenith asked. Roxy adjusted her hat. If my travels bring me near Buna village again. That was an honest answer, which meant it hurt. Rudius looked down at his cup. I drank too fast and coughed, because apparently even future devil power could not defeat poor timing. Roxy waited until Paul and Zenith went inside before she spoke again. Both of you will outgrow my lessons quickly, she said. Rudius shook his head. I don't think so. You already have in some ways. That does not make the lessons useless. It means you must understand why they mattered. She handed Rudius a folded page. Then she handed one to me. Mine contained a training schedule, danger rules, and several underlined warnings. One line had been written darker than the rest. Do not confuse being fearless with being ready. Subtle, I said. Necessary. Rudius read his own page in silence. His eyes were wet. He hated that. I pretended not to notice because I was a generous brother. Roxy turned to me. Leon, you will want to stand in front of every danger. Someone has to. Sometimes, other times, standing in front means blocking the people beside you from learning how to stand. That one landed badly. Rudius looked at me, then away. I folded the paper carefully. I hate when you make sense. Then remember it. The sun went low. The field turned gold. For a second, the whole world looked peaceful enough to be trusted. I knew better. But I also knew what I could do with one quiet day, one strict teacher, one brother beside me, and one more chance to practice stopping before the next ugly thing arrived. That night, I placed Roxy's page inside the notebook, beside the ribboned spoon. No new sync number appeared. Good. Some lessons were not supposed to be prizes. Chapter 15, The Road Out. Roxy left after breakfast. Nobody said it like that at first. Adults dressed it up with practical words: departure, travel, timing, weather, supplies, the road. But all those words meant the same thing. Roxy was leaving. Her bag was packed. Her staff was in hand. Her hat sat straight on her head because Roxy McGurdier apparently believed even grief should respect proper presentation. Paul tried to smile. It came out crooked. You sure you don't want an escort? He asked. I am sure. I am very escort-shaped. You are very trouble-shaped. Zenith laughed softly. Paul put a hand over his heart like he had been wounded. Rudius stood beside me with his hands clenched. He had prepared for this. We both had. Preparation turned out to be useless against the actual sight of Roxy at the door. I considered making a joke. The first 3 died before reaching my mouth. That was alarming. I relied on jokes the way Paul relied on overconfidence, and Rudius relied on thinking too hard. Roxy knelt in front of Rudius first. You are talented, she said, but talent is not character. Do not let one replace the other. Rudius nodded too quickly. Yes, teacher. And write clearly. Your notes become unreadable when you are excited. He made a broken little sound that tried to be a laugh. Yes, teacher. She hugged him. Rudius folded into like he had been waiting all morning for permission. I looked away because staring felt like theft. Then Roxy stood in front of me. Leon. Teacher. That sounded almost respectful. I am full of surprises. You are full of many things. Rude. Accurate. There a joke survived. Small victory. Roxy studied my face with that careful look of hers, the one that made me feel like a badly written spell diagram. Your power will grow, she said. Your judgment must grow faster. That is unfair. Power cheats. Then cheat back by thinking. I breathed out through my nose. I can do that. Can you do it when angry? I will practice. Can you do it when frightened? That answer took longer. I will practice that too. She nodded. Good. Then she hugged me. I stayed stiff for half a second, because my old life had left me bad at receiving things without trying to turn them into jokes. Then I hugged her back. She was small. That kept surprising me. Roxy had changed the entire shape of our lives while barely reaching Paul's chest. Strength really was an annoying concept. Be Leon first, she said quietly. I remember. Make sure Rudius remembers who he wants to become too. That is a lot of responsibility. Yes. You could stay and help. No. Worth a shot. She pulled back. Her eyes were dry. Mine were behaving suspiciously. Paul gave her travel money. Zenith gave her food. Rudius gave her one last folded note, which she placed carefully inside her bag without reading in front of him. Then Roxy stepped onto the road. We walked with her to the edge of the village. Nobody said much. The morning was cool. The grass was wet. A cart passed in the distance, and the driver waved, unaware that the world was doing something important. At the bend, Roxy stopped. This is far enough. Rudius looked like he wanted to argue. I almost did. Instead, I stood still. Control mattered in more places than combat. Roxy smiled faintly. Study, train, make mistakes that can be repaired. That is oddly specific, I said. For you, it needed to be. Rudius wiped his face with his sleeve. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for learning. Then she turned and walked away. We watched until the road took her from sight. The template remained quiet the entire time. For once, I was glad. This was not a moment for numbers. Paul put a hand on Rudius's shoulder. Zenith put one on mine. Nobody rushed us back. When we finally returned home, the house felt too large. Roxy's room was empty. The staff mark beside the door was gone. Her books had been sorted, her spare notes stacked, her little corrections still written in the margins of our work. Rudius sat at the table and opened his note from her. I did not read over his shoulder. That was private. My own note waited inside the notebook. I opened it in my room. Leon, you are not a weapon. You are a boy trusted with dangerous strength. There is a difference. Learn it every day. I read that line 3 times. Then I closed the notebook before my eyes could make another tactical error. Training without Roxy started that afternoon. Paul took over sword drills. Zenith checked our written lessons. Rudius and I practiced mana shaping under rules Roxy had left behind. It was clumsy at first, too quiet, too easy to feel like we were pretending. Then Rudius made a water ball collapse onto his own head. I stared. He blinked water from his eyelashes. Do not laugh. I lasted 4 seconds. He threw a wet cloth at me. I dodged. Paul shouted about indoor discipline. Zenith laughed from the kitchen. The house was still changed. But it was not empty. That night, I went outside alone and practiced stopping my fist 1 inch from the old fence branch. Once. Twice. 10 times. On the 11th, I felt the template stir, curious and hungry for motion. I smiled. Not today. My fist stopped cleanly. No reward came. No number rose. The road beyond the village stayed dark and quiet. Roxy was gone. The future was still coming. Rudius and I still knew too much and not enough. I still had 1% and a little more of a devil's legend sleeping under my skin. But I had rules. I had family. I had control. And when Rudius came outside with 2 cups of water and sat beside me without saying anything, I understood that control was not the same thing as being alone. We drank in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the empty road until the dark made it impossible to see where she had gone. For now, that had to be enough. Chapter 16, Quiet House Training Asterisk. The house was too quiet after Roxy left. That sounded impossible because Paul still existed. Paul breathed loudly, ate loudly, trained loudly, and once managed to sneeze loudly enough that Zenith dropped a bowl in the kitchen. But Roxy's kind of quiet had been different. Her quiet had weight. It sat at the table with a book open. It corrected spell diagrams without raising its voice. It made the air feel like someone responsible was watching the dangerous children. Now the house only had normal quiet. I did not trust it. Rudius did not either. He started waking earlier. I knew because I also started waking earlier, and every morning I found him outside with a practice staff, trying to make water move in thinner and thinner lines. On the 3rd morning, I leaned against the wall and watched him fail. "You look terrible," I said. Rudius flinched and nearly sprayed himself in the face. "Good morning to you too." "It is not good, it is early." "Then go back to bed." "Can't, the silence is suspicious." He understood that too quickly, which meant he had been feeling the same thing. The water thread broke apart again. Rudius stared at the puddle in the grass. "Roxy made this look easy," he said. That was one of her worst habits. Being competent. Rude to the rest of us. He huffed a laugh, but it faded fast. I stepped into the yard and picked up the branch Paul used for my 1-inch stopping drill. The end was worn smooth from too many almost punches. Rudius watched me, training. Existing dramatically. That means training. Unfortunately. I took my stance. The first stop was clean. The second was not. My knuckles brushed the branch, barely enough to move it, but enough that I had to count it as a failure. Rudius said nothing. Good brother. I tried again. 1 inch. Half an inch. Stop. The template did not wake. No number, no style judgment, no hungry feeling under my skin. Just my arms shaking and the branch still in one piece. Rudius returned to his water thread. By breakfast, we were both sweaty, muddy, and pretending we had not been emotionally ambushed by an empty house. Zenith took one look at us and set down extra bread. "Roxy would be pleased," she said. Rudius looked into his soup. I took the bread. She would say my elbow was wrong. Was it? Probably. Zenith smiled softly. Then fix it. That was cruelly practical. Paul took over the late morning lesson. He had decided we needed formation training, which sounded official until he explained that it meant Rudius standing behind me while I learned not to block every possible line of attack like a stubborn wall with hair. "You protect him," Paul said, pointing at Rudius, "but you also leave him room to act." "I am wonderful at sharing." Rudius coughed. Paul pointed his sword at him. "You, stop hiding behind your brother like he is furniture." Rudius straightened. "Yes, father." "Good. Leon, if I move left, what do you do?"